Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another EVERCADE video, and this week I'm going to be looking at the Namco Museum Collection 2. Is it as good as the first collection, or is it just a cash grab? Let's find out. The first Namco Museum Collection was one of the first reviews that I did, and you can check that out here. There's a few games on the second collection that I've heard of, but for the most part they're all new to me. Here they are ranked from worst to best. The blurb for Tower of Draga claims that it was a major influence in some of the most legendary games in the adventure genre. I assume it's talking about Zelda. I don't know if that's true, but firing it up, you've pretty much just got Pac-Man but with a sword. You never get a maze trying to find the key to unlock the next floor, and the quicker you do so will increase your score. Instead of swinging your sword, you just walk with it in front of you. Apparently it's full of mysteries and secrets, which is probably the part that would have influenced other games, but to get to any of that you need to put up with slow repetitive maze game and with irritating music. It's not for me. Splatterhouse II is a bit of a cult classic that's primarily aimed at fans of old school horror movies. That's not me. It's a brawler full of gore, and I'm sure references to film I've either never seen or can't remember. I remember having either this or the first game on the Mega Drive when I was a kid, and even then as someone who would sit and try out every fatality on Mortal Kombat just to get a glimpse of some gore I shouldn't be allowed to see, I didn't like this game. I loved horror, gore and brawlers as a kid, but this should have been right up my alley and wasn't. The death animations are pretty cool, but overall the game is just really slow, clunky, repetitive and boring. Walk a bit, punch. Walk a bit more, punch. Maybe hit someone with a weapon. Sure, this to be fair could describe most brawlers, and it is a very repetitive genre, but this one seems to go all out of its way to be as dull as possible. Just doubling the speed would have instantly made for a better game. I don't like the original Dig Dug, but thankfully the second one bears little to no resemblance to it, so that shouldn't have any bearing on my thoughts on this one. Unfortunately, I don't really like this one either. I first came across this one last year on Twitch, and I didn't enjoy it then any more than I did this time. The game is a puzzle-like game where you need to dig lines in the ground to make parts of the island fall into the sea, eliminating enemies that are standing on the island. Admittedly, there's something enjoyable about watching them all plummet into the ocean. I think as standalone games, old arcade puzzle games like this really don't hold up at the best of times. But what makes this one particularly annoying is that when you die, it carries on from where you left off. Usually you've died because you made a mistake, so it's putting you back on a tiny island full of monsters that you intended to kill before you made the mistake, and before the island became so tiny. I never hear anyone talk about Dig Dug 2, so I'm assuming it's not as popular as the original. Splatterhouse III is a big step up from its predecessor in almost every way. It now feels like a true brawler. It's much quicker, you can do combos, grab throws, and you're much more agile, being able to jump further as well as now moving up and down the screen as well as left to right. Not only is the gameplay less linear, but so are the levels. You now must find your way to the end through a maze of a mansion. Once you defeat all the enemies in a room, you'll get a choice of door you can go through, and you can switch to your map to see where you need to go. There are still weapons littered throughout, and also blue orbs. Find enough of these to fill your power bar, and you'll unleash the power of your mask with a Bane-like transformation. Sadly, the one thing I did like about the second game is missing here, and that's the cool death animations. Weapons all now just hit like a strong punch. You're no longer smashing enemies into walls or splitting them open. Getting knocked down when you take a big hit can be pretty irritating when it happens on repeat, but it's a decent game that's definitely better than the previous entries. An 8-bit shoot 'em up where you control a dragon. You can shoot forward and have a second shot to shoot enemies on the ground. When the game starts out, you go straight into a boss fight and then you start the game. It's a cool way to start a shooter. You can pick up power-ups throughout the game to work your way up to a two-headed dragon. It's not a bad game, it's just not anything special or memorable. The power-ups feel a bit lacking, but having to shoot things in the air and on the ground is always a nice little extra challenge. The main problem that this has, that has it so far down the list, is just that it feels and looks a bit bland. The NES-like colour palette is rarely great for shooters. I'd rather just have something a bit more exciting to look at and more interesting enemy variations. There are definitely better shooters on this collection, but it's not bad. Bad at all. I've always liked Gallagher, the sequel to Galaxian that was on the previous collection. In some ways, it's arcade perfection. It's a simple shooter that anyone can pick up and play and feel like they're doing well, but it's difficult to master and score chasing will have you coming back for more. It's addictive. It's a bit faster than Galaxian, with the enemies being nearer as well, giving you less time to line up your shot. Destroying an enemy isn't quite as satisfying in this one though, and I was disappointed it wasn't on the first collection, so it is nice to see it on this one. An all-time classic. This one was surprisingly fun. I thought it was going to be a bit shit because I judged a book by its cover. I'm pretty sure it's only bad book artists who came up with that saying anyway. In Walkman, you play as a character named Monster Fighter. You need to go around befriending monsters by giving them gifts and listening to stories about their day. No, obviously you fight monsters. There's a finite number of monsters on each level to destroy, I think it's 20, and bonus monsters appear that you need to shoot before they reach the other side of the screen. That's right, they're basically running for their life unarmed from the monster murderer. As well as the normal shoot levels, there are also levels that play out like Bomberman, where you can only drop bombs to murder monsters. You can upgrade your gun too, which turns it into an absolute beast. It's a fun arcade game that's worth checking out if you've never played it. I originally had a typo in my notes for this one and had it down as Warman. Feel free to post worse names for an arcade game / superhero in the comments. Pack Attack is one of those games that could be absolutely anywhere on this list depending on your preference. Personally, I like this sort of game, so it makes the number 4 spot for me. Other than the amazing Championship Edition, I'd probably rather play this than any other Pac-Man game. It's similar to Tetris or Puyo Puyo, but with Pac-Man and Ghost. You need to create lines to clear them off the screen like Tetris, but you can also get extra score by eliminating chains of ghosts. You line them up and then drop Pac-Man on to devour them. It follows gravity though, so you need to plan the group of ghosts well. As well as the normal arcade mode, there's also a puzzle mode that's purely based on unleashing Pac-Man in the right place. It's a decent puzzle game. Another shooter here, this one you're a knight on a Pegasus, I guess. You shoot enemies with your Enchanted Sword. I don't think it says anywhere that it's enchanted, but it shoots stuff, so it must be right. You can power up your sword Zelda style by holding down the shoot button and releasing a more powerful attack that can wipe out waves of enemies in one shot. It's pretty tough with some fun boss fights and power-ups. It doesn't look great for a 16-bit game, and the screen feels a bit too small, and it doesn't work in EVERCADE EXP's Tate mode. Still, it's a fun game and it's worth checking out if you like shooters. This one was almost my gem of the week. I'm fairly knowledgeable when it comes to fighting games, and as my friends will vouch, I've no hesitations when it comes to getting on stage and getting publicly embarrassed by pro players in fighting tournaments. That being said, if you'd told me that Namco had a weapon-based fighting game before Soul Blade, I'd have called you a liar. But, as it happens, a few months before Soul Blade, or Soul Edge if you play the arcade version, was released, Weaponlord came to 16-bit systems. It's not the prettiest fighter, It's got quite an ugly colour palette, but it plays pretty well, and the weapon clashing sound effects are really satisfying. It's got some interesting lore, which I'm always a sucker for in fighting games, especially older ones where you may like to play them single player, as there was no online and you hadn't mastered the art of going easy on your friends who didn't own it, so they'd come back and play more. The biggest issue with it that stops it being number one on the list is that it's on the Namco cart, which doesn't natively work on the EVERCADE verses. This means that without purchasing a mod cart, which very existence still baffles me as it defeats the whole point of an EVERCADE, you're not going to be able to play this one 2 players. Single player is pretty tough though. If you do like fighters though and you've never heard of this one, I'd say it's worth checking out. My EVERCADE gem of the week goes to Burning Force. You play a space cadet training to become a member of the Space Force and shoot enemies while flying across the ocean on your hover bike, heading towards what looks like the top of a partially destroyed Death Star. You can move left and right, shoot your regular gun, and also have an arsenal of missiles as well as powering up your gun. Once you get into the third area of each world, you swap your air bike for a flying ship that can move in all directions, setting you up for an end level boss fight. As you can see from the footage, the gameplay and design are very similar to Space Harrier. Not making it unique, but a style that you don't often come across, and personally I think it looks great and it's way better than Space Harrier. It looks like the sort of game that would have looked fantastic if they'd done a 3DS port like some of the Sega Ages 3D classics. It's also got a pretty decent soundtrack to boot. It's a lot of fun and definitely worth checking out. Now this was one of the first collections that I got for the EVERCADE. I've had it about 3 years. The reason that it's taken me so long to review this one is something that EVERCADE Versus owners should know, and that's it doesn't work on the EVERCADE Versus. For me personally that's a pain because trying to capture stuff on the EVERCADE EXP or the EVERCADE handheld is just not as easy. The other thing to mention with this one is that it's now out of print. So if you do want it or you want to complete your collection, you should really get it sooner rather than later. That being said, there's still plenty of places that you can pick it up, but if video game collecting's taught me anything, it's that stuff like this can just disappear overnight. Both these facts are a shame because this is a pretty good collection, and show that there's more to Namco than just Pac-Man. I feel like Namco spend that much time trying to shove Pac-Man down our throat, you kind of forget about the great catalogue that they've got. It's got good variety too, and there's a few gems on here that I'd never heard of. I've been torn with the score on this one because there are a few that I've given 7.5 to that have slightly better gems of the week, but as an overall package I think this is better than those. So for that reason I'm going to score this one a strong 8 out of 10. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and click subscribe for more reviews, rankings and hidden gems. I'll catch you next time.